Happy Wednesday, guys, and welcome to the Saratoga Podcast. Hi, Dan. Hi, Adam. How you been?
Hey, Robin. Hey, Adam. Good. I'm loving the weather. It's going to take a
I
short
know.
turn for the worse, but then it's coming back to warm weather again. A lot of reasons to be concerned about some businesses are hurting that rely on the snow and the cold, but boy, it's been a relaxing kind of February.
Yeah, I think I'm finally over the winter. I was happy that that seasonal depression is real. I was bummed out. I was at the point that it's the dark and the short days, and then the warm weather just yesterday brought me to life. So bring it on.
And we turn the clocks ahead in 10 days, so that'll be even better.
I thought we could talk about this another time, but I thought that we'd gotten rid of daylight savings, but I guess I'm wrong.
Yeah. I remember when it was sort of declared, right? But
Yeah.
I don't know what happened along the way, but I know I'm turning my clock ahead. Darn it!
I know. Right? I know. Well, listen, we have so much stuff. Sorry, I'm having lighting issues over here. We have so much stuff to talk about today. The Attorney General report. We have a City Council recap from last week. We have a guest on to talk about the paid parking program that's going to be implemented shortly. We have just lots to talk about. So should we get into it, guys?
As a quick teaser, Robin, is it going to be implemented shortly?
Yeah, that's well, watch and see, Dan. Watch and see. Sure, we'll be able to tell people definitively as soon as we get to it.
Sorry, Robin. One last thing, folks, don't forget we take comments and we read a lot of them, not all of them, but we read them and we respond to them.
Yeah, if you're on
I was going to say, pretty controversial. There's going to be a lot of topics covered, so feel free to chime in because you might not feel the same way that the panel does here.
Yes, absolutely. Feel free to chime in. We love dissenting opinions, especially. We love not agreeing because we think that's the best way to kind of hash some of these things out. So the first thing I wanted to bring up, because I just think it would be kind of weird not to, guys. Obviously, I was in the news a bit last week with the Attorney General report being released regarding the protests in Saratoga Springs over the years that I was public safety commissioner. And, so last week wasn't my most fun week of all time. But I just wanted to briefly touch on it, and then we can get back to it later in the show and see if you guys had any comments that you wanted to share or thoughts that you wanted to share on the subject.
We'll be talking later, and I think at some point, Robin, you were going to step off. Is that correct? Is that how we figured it out?
So I think if we have a guest on to talk about it, I will probably step off. But today we didn't have a guest on specifically to talk about the AG report, so I'm happy to stick around if we want to chat about it. Adam, I know you had some comments right off the bat, and then again, we'll get to it a little bit later in the podcast more extensively.
Sure. So, my feeling after reading the report and seeing some of the other actors at play comment on the report, I have a problem with Tish James politicizing the AG's and our justice system. I think you see this, not to bring national politics into the show, although sometimes I wish we would talk a little more about it. But when she was able to convict or get the conviction against Donald Trump for misrepresenting the value of his businesses, she did a great job, and she did what an attorney general should do. She then began to start tweeting about the interest he owes on a daily basis, which for me is grossly unprofessional. The attorney general office should be blind to justice, should go in there and execute the rule of the law without favor or without letting her personal bias get involved. I mean, this to me just is the height of unprofessional. It'd be like a police officer arresting somebody and then trolling them. And then, how can you trust what she says or does when she's that politicized? And again, it's the same reason police officers won't arrest somebody and then brag about it and go on social media and troll them on social media because it's highly inappropriate. And I think we see that's why my first reaction to this AG report is that it's highly political. It's not filled, and we heard from Tim Cole that it's not filled with facts. There's gross. I think his quote was, there's gross inaccuracies and woefully incompetent. And to support this, he gave some. I mean, maybe you want to touch about these inaccuracies, Robin, because they involve you. But Tim Cole said they had to go back and change this report. So for me, this report comes across as something that an activist would do to continue a political narrative. She's proven herself to do that with these tweets she's doing. And I think it's, again, doing our city a disservice by the far left and continuing to paint us as a racial city where we don't execute the law according to the law, but based on somebody's personal traits. So, Robin, do you want to talk a little bit about the inaccuracy? I know you're so you can't deep dive into too much, but
right. No, I definitely will say that I was someone who believed that the Attorney General's office, just in general, whatever state you were going to be in, would be prosecuting things without, political bias or favor, or, they would do it with an open mind and do it in the way that the rest of our justice system the way in which the rest of our justice system works, which is, you're supposed to be blind. Justice is supposed to be blind. I can say that hasn't been my experience at all. And then I will say the one thing that really struck me about this report that made it difficult for me to take. Well, let me just say the inaccuracy that I saw just right off the bat was probably the most written about, the most discussed, the most controversial moment of any protest that we've had in the city, probably in the city's history, but certainly when I was public safety commissioner, the most discussed moment, the most written about moment was the July 30th, 2020 protest when the sheriff's department used pepper balls and shot them into the ground because one of our police officers was making an arrest and protesters started to swarm the police officer. And so that was what the sheriff's department deployed, per their policy, and shot into the ground in a way that would disperse the crowd and push the crowd back from the arresting officer. And that was truly the most, I think, controversial, written about, and discussed moment of any protest when I was in office. And so when the Attorney General attributes that moment to the Saratoga Springs Police Department and not to the Sheriff's Department, that is such a misrepresentation, such a massive mistake to me. I don't know how anyone could have made that mistake had they put in more than 30 seconds looking into that protest to understand what had happened. And so it's hard for me not to believe that was an intentional mistake. But to me, that undermines the legitimacy of the entire document. If that's how sloppy they were going to be in terms of their research and their reporting on factual elements that they're discussing in this report. So yeah, there you go.
Thumbs up.
Yeah. I'm going to jump in and concur with a lot of what both of you said. I'm not, let me just say, yeah, you're right, Robin. That ink wasn't even dry on that document, and they had to say, oops. Mm-hmm. And I'm not sure if it was intentional. The old Henry Kissinger quote of never waste a good conspiracy theory when incompetence is the more likely culprit comes to mind here. That is really sloppy. The whole thing, let me just, a quick aside, a quick qualifier. I'm not here to say every last thing about that report was wrong. We do need to take that and learn from it. I'm not going to go in depth to it, Robin, because you may be a defendant or a litigant in some sort of legal action down the road here. It's all been said as much that there's going to be legal action. So I'm going to hesitate to go deep into it. But at least overall, that report reminded me when I was when I was back in 10th grade, the ultimate procrastinator, and the book report was due. And I waited till 9:30 the night before to finally open up a book. And then I was desperate. So I went to Cliff Notes and I just put a bunch of crap down so I'd have something to hand in the next morning. And that's what it reminded me of. It was so poorly done. And you mentioned, Robin, about the attorneys general around the country, but the New York Attorney General should really stand for something. This is the Empire State, Wall Street, New York City. There should be such competence and eloquence in writing. And 30 pages, and at least the version I had didn't have anybody's name on it. There were someone said they saw another version that did list names. I didn't see it in my version that I downloaded and copied. But there should have been names. Who else wrote this? Obviously, Tish James is the AG. But who in her staff wrote this? There was not a single attachment to this document. How could you write about something so important and not put some attachments for illumination further of what's going on? And Adam, to your point, yeah, they came up with a conclusion and started from there. The conclusion, the false conclusion was they were racist. They were intent on suppressing First Amendment rights. So then they went back, reverse engineered it to accuse things. Again, I'm not going to go into detail, but I'm not here to say everything about that was wrong. They did note that the city was caught off guard, and that's true. But then they never gave the city any acknowledgement of a lot of, we got some training in and so forth. They put it in, but there was no acknowledgement that was a good step. It was not, it was all one-sided. It was no like, oh, the city did a decent job here. They were a little late to that, but they at least recovered and so forth and things like that. None of that. It was just so one-sided. But the city has to learn from this, right? We all have to learn from this where there were mistakes. We were caught off guard. There were mistakes made. There are some things in there that I'd like to dig deeper just so I'm not making a surface assessment on a 28-30 page report. It's hard to make conclusions, and they always came to these hard conclusions when really it could have gone both ways. The John Catone quote, when he talked about the narrative at the time was the entire police department was racist and they killed Darryl Mount. That's a horrible narrative. That was wrong. And that's what I took Catone's comments at that. Was that, do I wish he would have dialed it back a little bit or said it in a different way? Yeah. But the narrative was this was a city of racists. There was a police department of racists, and they murdered, I believe was the word, Darryl Mount. Wrong. The AGs did a disservice. The ink wasn't even dry, and they had to backtrack already. Good for Tim Cole for pointing that out.
Yeah.
Well said, Dan. And I think I can add this one tiny comment, which is when you mentioned the AG's office being unprofessional or Tish James acting in a way that's unprofessional, the man who deposed me, wildly unprofessional in how he was asking questions, his demeanor, just the entire interaction with the person who was deposing me from their office. So much so that at one point my attorney said, we can get up and leave at any second because this is so unprofessional that I will take it to a judge and you don't have to continue this deposition because of how he's treating you. And, I didn't leave, of course, and I finished. But all in all, it was a disappointing experience. Anyway, we can touch on this a little bit more later. We have so much other stuff to talk about, including a city council recap, but also we wanted to talk about the paid parking program that is about to start as of May 1 in the city. And to that end, we have here with us Abby, who runs Saratoga Living magazine and beyond, I will say. And we are so happy to have her with us today because she did you guys did an excellent piece in Saratoga Living called Everything We Know About Downtown Saratoga's Paid Parking Proposal So Far.
That's right. And this is in our Saratoga Living After Hours that I really suggest people opt into for the summer because there's so much going on. It's 3 times a week emailed to your email, so it's not on the Saratoga Living site, although you can sign up to subscribe. It's one of the tabs on the top. So yes, the DBA, the Downtown Business Association, had a pretty dramatic meeting about the paid parking program. And so Natalie Moore, our reporter, went and we did a big write-up on it, and we've gotten a lot of response.
She attended the meeting, Abby?
Yes, actually 2 people from our staff were there because we are members. Okay. And so we just thought we didn't want to wait until the public hearing. We wanted to give the floor to the business owners first, and the residents, I'm sure, will have a lot to say about it as well. They will have their chance whenever they announce the public hearing about it.
And I did just call the Department of Public Works to find out if one was set. The person I talked to couldn't give me an answer, but to her credit, she said, I'm going to find an answer and get back to you. But that was just 40 minutes ago. So I'm not going to take the call during this podcast, but we may have something to follow up, Robin, perhaps on the Facebook site or something if there was a date set.
So let's just jump right into I love how you broke this out, by the way, you guys. Really, again, recommend signing up for the Saratoga Living After Hours because it's just good stuff in general. But this article in particular is so meaty. and is organized so well. So some of the basics, as you wrote them out, the city is proposing a seasonal parking program that will be in effect from May 1 through September 30th, although then it says that's subject to change. So, and then they said, I guess it's not cost effective to enforce a program like this year round. So I'd be interested to see how they came up with some of these numbers. But so was there talk of maybe that September 30th date getting pushed out and becoming a little longer?
That is exactly what the business owners want. They said that, we're trying to become this year-round town and we support the locals, and it's not just about the tourists in the summer. And then we have paid parking after track ends. And so they would like the paid parking to end sooner so we can go back to really getting not just Saratoga, but Milton and Ballston Spa and all the surrounding towns to come to our town as soon as the tourists start to.
So like Labor Day, things would go back to.
Yeah, right now everything is up in the air. This was Jason's first proposal, and but yes.
And by Jason, we're talking about Commissioner Golub, who's the Public Works Commissioner. So city residents and employees of downtown businesses will not have to pay for parking, and so we as a city resident. Abby and I live next door to each other, by the way, fun fact. So
that's why it's the party zone.
That is the party zone. So just to jump into how city residents, employees will be approaching this. All city residents and downtown employees will be eligible for parking permits for each of their vehicles. You'll file for a permit with your license plate number and proof of residency via an online portal. Business owners can register their employees' vehicles. There will be no physical permits. Your registered license plate will serve as your permit, and residents will be able to give time-limited guest permits to visitors.
So this was the biggest hang up right there.
Yeah.
So the biggest concern is that any of us, we can go park somewhere and we don't have to leave. And so will that affect turnover? So if I did come in from Ballston Spa and I wanted to, I had 45 minutes, I wanted to jump into a few of my favorite stores and there's no parking because residents are just completely taking up all of the parking, and said, oh, okay, well now I'm down to 30 minutes, I'm just going to leave. That is the number one concern.
Well, and I can also see someone being like, oh, if you want to go downtown, take my car, you can park all day. Right? Or at night, because apparently this is going to be enforced 24/7, which I have a comment on in a minute.
Because,
yeah,
the garages are where a lot of the employees have been parking. So they will now be pushed out of the garages. And so a lot of the street parking, it really could fill up. And again, I think, Jason keeps saying, we all know how calm and reasonable he is, that, we see how it works and then we can always come back and make changes. But that is the number one concern that the business owners touch. And Kiss brought it up as well.
So, and they do say the parking situation on Broadway will stay as it is, which is 2-hour free parking, which means I'll continue to get tickets on Broadway. But street parking, surface lots, and parking garages throughout downtown will have new regulations. Tourists and residents of areas outside the city limits will have to pay $2 per hour to park in those designated areas downtown. One of the things that kind of jumped out at me, though, that I was kind of shocked to read was parking permits. So like for residents, will not be eligible everywhere. Select spaces and parking garages and lots will be for paid parking only. So we could all park there, but we'd have to pay. So I assume the best spots in the parking lots are going to be paid parking only for everybody.
We don't know that yet, but that is their answer for how they are going to try to keep turnover going.
It's interesting because I actually feel like the turnover is a bigger issue on the street than it is like I don't, as long as I can get a parking spot in a parking lot, like I don't care that much about where the spot is. It's more so on not Broadway, but all the side streets that come off of Broadway, and parking on those side streets. People
can park there. Streets, I don't know if you have the map in front of you, are permit only.
Robin, I sent it to you, by the way.
Sorry, we had weird upload issues with it, but
it's a hard to read map. I really had to zoom in and try to figure out, for example, our street is, I think, if I read the map correctly, and I think I have, completely permit only. So anyone who lives here, if your boyfriend comes to visit, he now has to park all the way down in a parking garage really far away. So those kinds of issues I expect to come up at the public hearing.
Yeah. Wait, sorry, go ahead, Adam.
I was going to say, are you breaking the news that Robin has a boyfriend?
Oh yeah, God.
Breaking news.
all my side pieces. Here's
We're,
the map.
Can I comment on this map for a second?
Yeah.
On the west side, some of those parking areas go all the way to Lawrence Street. On the east side, all the way to Regent Street. That is, maybe we thought it was all downtown, but it goes well into the neighborhoods, in my view, anyway. That is significant.
Yes.
And it was a bit shocking.
Yeah, I would agree with that. So resident only on. So Abby, thank you for clarifying that. Because
blue is the resident only. Is that correct? The permit only.
Yeah.
Blue is permit only. Red is 2-hour or permit holders, and green is visitor paid parking.
And Dan is permit, so it's residents and if you're employed downtown.
So, all right. Well,
yeah, we're just getting started. This was a business, downtown business association meeting. So we did hear from all the business owners, and we still got a lot to talk about on the resident side for sure. And one thing that did come up. So this is politics. Jason does have a piece in there that some of the money raised will go towards the DBA. They do need help. So that's probably smart. They did talk a little bit about revenue. The very conservative number was at, I think, 30% occupancy during the week, a little bit higher on the weekend, was $1 million for the first year. I think they did say that they were expecting that number to go up as they pay off the costs of, all the, the meters and things like that. So I think that they didn't mean revenue. I think they meant net profit. So that's even better.
Quick aside.
Yes.
This kind of goes into another topic that we're talking about today, which is short-term rentals. So for people who have Airbnb or people coming to stay for a week or two during the summer, I guess they could apply for a limited time permit for their visitors, but will there be a limit on how many times you could apply for that over the summer? Like if you have 20 people come visit during the summer, can all 20 vehicles get time limited guest permits, or are they going to limit that number? I don't think we know the answer to that yet. And also
over the Venn diagram of these two new proposed.
I know. Yes, exactly. The Venn diagram. And then how time limited will it be? Will you have to apply every other day for a guest permit for your guest? I mean, I just think that there's a lot of, seems like the type of thing that it has to roll out to really understand where we have some confusion and where things need to be tweaked. But it sounds like it could be a little bit of excuse my language, a little bit of a clusterfuck to try to get this up and running.
Yeah.
Also,
quick aside.
Commissioner Golub, he's a very popular commissioner. I think he will have an easy time winning that seat back. So that allows him to kind of take chances and try some neat programs. And I like this idea of we're becoming, we're not a small city anymore. We're a medium-sized city that has medium-sized city problems. Paid parking is something that's done all over the nation in cities our sizes. So it's a program we have to look to implement. But, after looking at this, sometimes you think, would it be easier just to throw up those old quarter things on Broadway and maybe a couple side streets?
I know, because for some reason, when I'm reading this and it's okay, downtown parking will be broken up into 3 zones: permit only parking, free 2-hour or permit holder parking, and visitor paid parking. My brain kind of breaks into pieces. It's just for some reason hard to kind of get my head around. And I feel like I would have a hard time describing this to a visitor, where they could park and where they couldn't park. I feel like it would be very difficult to describe. And when I was public safety commissioner, one of the most frequent complaints I would get would be people who got parking tickets because they didn't understand the signage that we already have. Because we do have a lot of sign pollution, and there are a lot of signs that kind of almost look like they conflict, and you're not sure if you're in a loading zone, if you're in a 2-hour zone, if you're in a no parking from here to the corner zone. And so people get really upset, and it was usually people coming from out of town because they just didn't understand the signage. So I'm just thinking we're keeping that signage for the most part on Broadway, then we're adding these 3 different zones and these options. And I do think it's I wouldn't want to be the person who has to message this, from a marketing standpoint, because I just think it's I think it's kind of tricky. And then we get to paying to park. So how are we actually paying for this? There'll be pay stations for cash and cards located in the garages and parking lots designated for paid parking. Mobile pay will also be available. If you wind up needing more time than you originally paid for, you can add it via your mobile device. So presumably there's going to be an app that you download. Mm-hmm. Awesome. Just would love to have another app on my phone.
To take your money.
Yeah, the only app I like is the one that comes before entrees. And then paid parking will be enforced 24 hours a day. So this was my other little question. So I don't know if I should be sharing this, but previous to this proposal, I know when we have parking enforcement out, and I can tell you it is not 24 hours a day. It is not even really 12 hours a day. We don't have people out ticketing, around the clock. So they're going to have to hire a lot more parking enforcement, like significantly more, if they're actually going to be doing this enforcing it 24 hours a day, which is a significant cost in and of itself. Because you'd probably have to hire at least, I would say, 3 more parking enforcement officers, which would double.
The readers that go around and can automatically read the license plates.
Right.
I don't know if that's a person with a reader, and then if that makes it faster so they can kind of zoom through the.
Yeah.
Well, you still got to put something on the car, right? Yeah, it does make it faster. You ride around, it's a license plate reader, it's an attach, something inside your car, but you still got to get out and do it. My guess is
mail it to your house.
Twice a year they'll do it at 3 a.m. just to put the scare into people, but they won't do it that often. I'm going to jump in here. My significant issue with this proposal, as well as the short-term renting proposal, is it seems like the major impetus of this is money, to get money into the city coffers, which would be fine generally, but if it undoes our great downtown, both in our whole area, from the short-term rental thing, where people come here to spend money and go to the track, and the hotels are full, so they've got the option. Going jumping subjects here a little bit to the short-term rental, but it's all about money. And I'm sorry, I said this before when Commissioner Golub was on. I'm not buying the revenue projections. I believe Commissioner Golub believes that they're conservative. He's being honest. Don't get me wrong, but what always happens, whether it's parking or red light cameras or speed cameras, the money always comes in lower, at least initially, than was projected, significantly lower. And they always say, well, the equipment didn't come on time, or there was an equipment breakdown, or there was a software malfunction. Fine, you're right. There are reasons for that. But almost invariably, the projections are not where they are. And if we destroy downtown businesses in the process, or at least harm them in the process, holy cow, what did we do?
Can I just say one thing? I would rather have red light cameras at every freaking red light in the entire city of Saratoga Springs than I would have than doing this. Like, I would prefer that, because we've got kids and pedestrians crossing the street everywhere, and people do fly through red lights all the time, and it would make things it would make things significantly safer. It would bring in revenue. And it would enforce traffic laws that, again, we're a pedestrian-friendly city. It would just keep everything safer, and you could use the revenue in the same exact way, and you wouldn't have to do any of this garbage. So, Jason, if you're listening, call Tim Cole. Tell him to just do red light. I mean, honestly, am I wrong? Wouldn't you?
Yeah, I think it would require state legislation, because we have them in the state, New York City and so forth, but they're very limited, subject to state approval in legislation.
Abby, let me ask you, and maybe you said this, but so to sum everything up, the business community, are they totally against this? Are they against this with revisions, or are they pro this proposal? And then I don't think we know from the residential community yet. Is it? I know that's a kind of 2 questions, but is that correct?
No. So we actually don't know. They were only sort of bringing up their concerns, especially because some of the money goes to the DBA. Some of the money is going to go to some, other fixes around town, keeping up with the garages long term. Of course, they want that revenue coming in. There were just a few things I think they want fixed first. Personally, I moved here from California. I'm used to paying, every time I leave my house. There are ways that you can do it. And I personally think that they'll get there. I am very, very interested to see what the residents have to say, just because I can't imagine, like I said, looking outside and my friends not being able to park right in front of my house anymore when it's completely empty. I think there's more revisions too. And also, I misspoke a little bit earlier talking about, what September after Labor Day looks like. The more that we work to get those tourists in here year round, the more this sort of stuff matters, and the more that we want to always keep our eye on the locals that also keep us in business. Because if we're doing something geared towards the tourists, and then we're making it so our folks from Boston Spa can't swing by for 30 minutes if they want to, I think that is going to be one of the biggest issues as well.
So if you guys don't mind, I'm going to read the quotes in this article from Maddie Zanetti, who is the owner of Impressions and Dark Horse Mercantile. And the Zanettis are a family that is well known in Saratoga Springs for their businesses, for everything they do for the community. And so oftentimes they are, they're people who people really stand up and pay attention to when they have an opinion about something. So in this article, it says, quote, "Some people are only stopping in to grab a coffee or pick up an order, and some just come here to walk around and enjoy the social aspect," says Maddie Zanetti, owner of Impressions and Dark Horse Mercantile. "We could easily lose those people if they are being charged to park." And then she also says again towards the end of the article, "Hopefully the revenues will help to improve our downtown, but I worry that the revenues raised from parking may not always outweigh the revenues lost in sales tax collected from the small businesses that there are people are coming downtown to support." So, I mean, that seems very reasonable to me, those concerns. And I will say, for people who have been kind of a little panicked about this when they learn about this, the one thing I do say to them is that the one thing I know about Jason Golub and how he's functioned as a commissioner is that he's not going to put a program in place that isn't working and continue to do the program, even if it's not working the way it's supposed to work. He's just not that type of guy. He'll adjust, he'll course correct, and based on the success or lack of success. But I just think what's tricky about this is that success could be defined in a lot of different ways here. It could bring in a decent amount of revenue, and maybe that's enough to dump back into some of these parking garage areas where we really need more policing and more security. And maybe that's done in a way that, even though residents are irritated about this plan, they can walk through the Woodlawn garage without a problem, without seeing vagrancy, without being harassed, and that outweighs the negatives. Do you know what I mean?
Absolutely. And I'm not sure if maybe I didn't send it over, but did you see the DBA's response to the article? They were, Heidi said something along the lines of, she needed some more time to get her thoughts together. So she didn't make our deadline for the article, but she did send in a response, and we shared it with our subscribers. It was definitely shared around. We had over 100 more views than we have subscribers. So when that happens, that shows you exactly how important this issue is. And she just kind of agrees with everything that you just said. My number one concern is the lack of turnover the resident parking permit may cause. She thought that the length, the May-October, was excessive. Downtown businesses rely on our locals, not only from Saratoga Springs, but the surrounding areas of Greenfield, Wilton, Milton, Ballston Spot, et cetera. That's what I was trying to come up with for their support year round. So she had a lot to say as well. It's important.
Well, I think this is something we're going to keep our eye on. I know a lot of people are also asking me when they'll be able to start submitting their information to get a resident permit or to get their employees permits. I don't know when that's going to happen. This is supposed to start May 1. So I would think the city would want to start doing that like right now, like right this second, because they could be getting thousands and thousands of applications.
That feels almost impossible, right? Because you got to get software, you got to get the app, you got to get the pay stations.
The only thing that is not as difficult as you think is that the system that we currently use to ticket people, that company also offers all of these services. I don't know if they've gone through that same company, but when we had looked into converting one of the parking lots into paid parking, it was actually like significantly easier than I thought, because we were already working with that company to do all the ticketing. So it was it was just a lot easier than I thought it was going to be. So maybe that's the case now. I'm not entirely sure.
And he had said too, that just like with the short-term rentals, that there will be some sort of amnesty program for the summer as people sort of get used to it for locals.
I mean, maybe there could be amnesty for tickets we've already gotten. I don't know. Also, we have a really great comment here from a frequent watcher, Dina, who says, "What about families with children in school? The district has families with addresses outside the city. Some even have Schuylerville addresses. I would think paying for parking would deter stopping downtown to spend money." I actually think that's a really good point, because our school district it does encompass a ton of area outside of the city limits. And so I think that's a really good point. And maybe that could also be addressed in terms of the seasonality of this, because if it fell during the school break, that would eliminate kind of that issue, so to speak, a little bit at least.
Yeah, I look forward to the public hearing. Again, hearing the business owners say what they think their customers will do. It will be very interesting to hear from customers such as Dina about what they will do, right? So.
Yeah. I'm sure Commissioner Golub is really looking forward to that hearing too.
Let me say something on this, and I'm nitpicking a little bit. I'll continue to nitpick, to be honest. But I tip my hat to Commissioner Golub on this issue for this is a significant amount of his staff as well, obviously. So significant amount of research, preparation of documents, political capital. Right? That this could hurt him. Adam mentioned he's safe, but it doesn't mean it could hurt him for another. It couldn't hurt him for another office or something like that. So I credit him as well as I credit Commissioner Moran, even while I will probably nitpick the short-term rental proposal with its flaws as well. I credit them for being doers.
Yeah, no, I agree. I mean, I do think they've probably picked off 3 of the most controversial and hot topic issues they could have possibly picked off to address, which would be paid parking, leave pickup, and short-term rentals. So I applaud them for having the cojones to want to take on those issues, but hopefully they will have the patience to see them through, because it's not going to be easy. These are things that people are seriously passionate about, and they've come up in the past, and they have been to the death debates. So I hope Commissioner Golub and Commissioner Moran, when it comes to short-term rentals, had their big boy pants on, because it's not going to be easy.
No. In fact, a quick aside on short-term rentals. Did you see, Adam, on your Facebook page on what's going on in Saratoga? There were 2 posts in the past 24 hours. One was a petition against the short-term rental proposals, change.org, I believe. And the other was, I assume, a related one, was about an advocacy group forming to protest the proposals for short-term rentals. So that one is heating up, I think, more so than paid parking at this point.
Yeah, maybe.
Guys, wait, real quick before we get into that, I'm going to let Abby go, because I'm not sure she wants to sit around and do a city council recap and a short-term rental recap. So I just want to say thank you, Abby, so much.
Thanks, guys, so much. Good to see you.
All right.
Editor of Saratoga Living. Everybody go sign up for Saratoga Living After Hours. It's amazing content. Thank you, Abby.
Thanks, Abby.
Okay, sorry, we're back. So just to kind of kick this off, because I think it's important we do our little city council recap. The city council did have a meeting last week. Oh, wow, exclamation point. I guess I'm really excited about this recap. The city council did have a meeting last week, and there was a public hearing at the very beginning to discuss the recently proposed short-term rental regulations. And a ton of people showed up, way more than I expected, you guys, considering it was winter break. I thought for sure, because it was public school winter break week, that there wouldn't be as many people, but it was packed with people, and it certainly went longer than the hour it was scheduled for, so everyone could get their public comment in. Most people were against it. I would say probably, I'm guesstimating here, maybe 85% of the people speaking had issues with it, and the issues were all over the place. I mean, the myriad of problems don't really, it's hard to kind of condense them into one point of view, because it was people who are Airbnb owners who had issues. It was people who live in neighborhoods where there are places being Airbnb'd who have separate concerns. Everyone's concerns were kind of different and unique to their situation, but across the board, it was pretty negative in terms of the comments. So I don't know if either one of you guys watched that at all.
I did. I agree with you. And my personal take on it, if I were there, is there does need to be some level of regulation. This proposal was way too far, especially the money. It's like the city's trying to become partners with these landlords. We we're the mafia. We want some of your money.
Can we talk about money real quick and just tell people what it was? So to register your property so you can rent it in the short term, you'd have to pay $1,000 registration fee. That's $1,000. And now it would last you for 2 years, but it's $1,000 upfront cost just to be able to be in the mix, to be able to think about doing a short-term rental. You're paying $1,000.
Part of the problem there is a large hotel permit fee is $150. So that was if you have a 100+ rooms hotel, you're only paying $150 to register, and that was brought up for context.
And it didn't differentiate. You could be renting a trailer for 1 weekend a year, or your house on Meadowbrook, off of Meadowbrook for every day of the year, and you still pay the same fee. So there were some flaws with that, but it was too much, period. Maybe if there was a sliding scale, maybe the top could be that, depending on how often you do it. But it really needs work, and it needs to be dialed back.
Yeah, and as it compares to different municipalities, I mean, there are people who have made graphics about this. It is everywhere around us in New York State, it's like $100, maybe $150. I don't think I saw anything really more expensive than $150 or $200 to register for an Airbnb. So this is like way off in terms of that $1,000 fee. And I just thought, from a political perspective for Commissioner Moran, when that's the first thing people see, it already gets them into just kind of a negative headspace about what's going to come after that. And so I thought he kind of shot himself in the foot a little bit by starting off with that $1,000 fee. It just feels like a really yucky money grab.
Yeah,
I agree. I think there's going to be another hearing. Do I remember correctly? A second hearing on that, or no?
He kept the public hearing open, so yes, we are going to continue to have hearings. Which is good. I mean, this is a really complex and nuanced issue.
Robin, real quick, can you difference between a public hearing and public comment? Can you just elaborate on that real quick? Because I'm not sure, including myself, fully understand.
So there are a lot of things that require from our charter and from our local laws, they require a public hearing if you're going to change them. Oftentimes that's part of city codes. Or in this case, it's implementing regulations that would affect city code. And so actually to pass the piece of legislation at the city council table, you must have a public hearing scheduled, and you must notice it in the newspapers for a certain amount of days before the meeting. And at a public hearing, people can come and make a comment. Typically in the past, you've been able to comment for an unlimited amount of time. Mayor Safford, I think, imposed a 3-minute limit maybe per person on this one and scheduled it for an hour and hoped that would be enough time for everyone to speak. The city council could do
a public comment. Essentially what it does is it just kind of it proactively notifies people like, hey guys, we want to talk about this at this city council meeting, but any public comment meeting and pretty much talk about anything, or any public, right. But
so just to distinguish, I think what you're getting at is that at a public hearing, when it's centered around an issue like this, if you're going to comment, you have to be commenting about the topic of the public hearing. You can't just comment about anything in general. Once the public hearing is concluded and we move on to the city council meeting, then regular public comment period starts, where you can comment about anything under the freaking sun, during your 2-minute time limit or whatnot.
In character or not.
Yes, in character or not. So that would be the difference. So something like this does require a public hearing. You can have one public hearing and then close the public hearing and then vote on the issue. Oftentimes that's done when you're doing things like, this was on the agenda last week. There was a change in where they were placing stop signs, I think, in some neighborhood or something along those lines. No one had a comment during the public hearing. They opened the public hearing. No one said anything. They closed the public hearing and then they voted on it that night. But for an issue this complex and challenging, I think a couple public hearings are warranted, and presumably Commissioner Moran will take in that feedback and adjust the proposed legislation based on the feedback he's getting. That's the point.
A quick aside on that, when that second hearing came, and it was Commissioner Cole that I think had that hearing or led that hearing. It was such a, let's face it, we're all political junkies. And when it gets heated there, it's kind of exciting. And so the short-term rental energy was through the ceiling. And then they went to Commissioner Cole's issue, and you could just hear like a balloon deflating. No one cared. No one understood. Yeah, exactly. It was comedic. Reminded me of the old Buck Henry skit on Saturday Night Live. I won't go into it, but for those of you who know what I'm talking about, you'll remember it.
Well, so I would say that was probably the most discussed and most kind of important part of the last city council meeting. But then the other thing that did come up was a bit, at least, was the on-call pay controversy having to do with the deputy commissioners. That's been kind of percolating for the last couple of weeks. That came up again during Commissioner Moran's agenda because Commissioner Moran is proposing a change in grade, in civil service grade, which is tied with pay for a few of the employees in his office. The change in grade was approved by the Civil Service Commission. Then it goes to the city council where you vote on it. While they were having that discussion, Commissioner Cole brought up the fact that our labor attorney for the city, whose name is Brian Kremer, had looked over the on-call pay provisions that were written for the deputy commissioners and said essentially that they were unlawful as written. And so Commissioner Cole has really made a point of this because he thinks it should be corrected. And so when Commissioner Moran was trying to make these changes in grade and pay for some of his employees, Commissioner Cole said, essentially, I'm not going to vote on anything like this until we're able to address this unlawful element of how some of the employees are being compensated. So he wants to address that before he votes on people getting a bump in grade or a bump in salary who are working in City Hall. So he and Mayor Safford, I believe, both voted no to the proposed grade changes in Commissioner Moran's department, but they were outweighed by the 3 yes votes from Commissioner Moran, Commissioner Songvi, and Commissioner Golub. So both items did pass, but that issue was brought up again.
Sometimes you guys ask me about areas of the law, and I just didn't work for a firm that handled a myriad of issues, so I don't know certain areas of law. But this is one area of the law I do know. It's public sector labor law, and I've worked on upgrades for state employees, and to have even a chance in hell to have it approved by state civil service, we had to do a phone book thick document that we took months to prepare to justify the increase in grade for this position. My concern is Saratoga Springs, kind of like a different issue, but the Van Dam issue, where it just comes up for a vote and sounds good, let's vote it in without research, without clarifying what the law is, without written justification, documented research justification. And I don't know anything about these positions. They may have deserved these upgrades for a long, long time, but until you put it in writing and make a justified argument for that, this city just keeps shooting itself in the foot and doing things willy-nilly.
Wait, just so you know, Dan, so since I'm the geek in the group and listen to all the freaking meetings, I listen to the Civil Service Commission meetings, and what you're describing does happen to a degree at the Civil Service Commission meetings, because there's 3 commissioners on the Civil Service Commission, and they have to approve these upgrades in grade or pay, and someone has to basically come before them and make the argument as to why they're asking for these grade changes. And so in this case, it was the Deputy Commissioner of Accounts, Stacey Connors, who went and kind of made the case for these grade changes to the Civil Service Commission. They then voted to approve it, which is then it goes to the City Council. So there was kind of an element of that happened before.
Was there a written submission though, as well, or just oral argument or a verbal presentation?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I'm always listening to it on my headphones, like doing other stuff, like usually cleaning the house. It's a really glamorous life I lead. And so I can't remember off the top of my head if she submits something or if there's an application that's submitted in advance. So I don't totally know, but there is a process at least.
Yeah. Now, just because New York State requires essentially a phone book thick document, I don't expect Saratoga Springs to have the same thing, but I expect a well-researched, well-argued, well-thought-out written submission of, I'm not going to give a number of pages, but of something, of some substance. This is city taxpayers' money, and as well for the employees as well. They deserve to have it well thought out, well written, well presented.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. I totally agree.
As the city, it is, especially from 3 years ago when that city council came in, has been very good at spending and raising taxes, and we constantly hear spend, raise taxes, look for alternative revenue sources, which raising taxes, and it is justified in some cases, but this is over the top. And as a city, we are changing the fundamental dynamics of our government when we were becoming we had reasonable taxes here, but there's only so much of a burden the homeowners can take. And every one of these adds up into unbalanced budgets, or budgets that need to be balanced by raising taxes, as we're seeing. So I'd really like to see a little fiscal responsibility, prove it, actionable, not just words, but let's go through a year without raising taxes, and then let's talk about raises and spending more money.
I kind of agree with you there. I do feel like, especially the last city council had no fiscal, there was not one person on there who was kind of worried about the money. And they did seem to spend a tremendous amount of money. And despite the fact that we had incredibly, incredibly healthy reserves, still raise taxes and still feel the need to implement, for example, this paid parking program, or put $1,000 fees attached to short-term rentals as revenue raisers when we had a really healthy fund balance. So I don't know if they're predicting these massive expenses in the future that we just don't know about, that we're having to like prepare for or what. But it does seem like we need a little fiscal, more fiscally conservative choices to be made. I would appreciate that at least.
And let me say, going back to the separate on-call issue, the previous council, at best, that was a debacle, right? At best, it might be worse. It might be criminal, perhaps.
Yeah.
And so when the separate issue of raising grades and pay and so forth is done, I don't have confidence that it was done right. Now, maybe it was. Maybe there is a submission out there, a written submission, and there was some procedure followed and so forth. But I don't have confidence in that happening.
And what's hard for me, Dan, and I feel like this will resonate with you as an attorney, what's hard for me is that when the labor attorney, Brian Kremer for the city, who's been used for the last many years, has an opinion on something, the city attorney, Tony Izzo, agrees with that opinion, but the city council still feels the need to get an alternative opinion, like a third opinion, because they don't like the opinion of the labor attorney and city attorney. Yeah. Like, you're going to just go opinion shop? Like, I'm kind of like
at a significant cost, by the way.
Yeah.
Right. Like, you're already paying your city attorney. You're paying this outside firm.
Yeah.
And so sorry to interrupt you, Rob. Now we're going to use taxpayer funds to get a third firm involved.
Exactly.
Then you got to, if you're going to do that, then fire the labor firm, because you have no faith or trust in his knowledge. And he is a good attorney. He is a respected attorney. Shame on the city council for just disregarding what again, we as city taxpayers paid for that attorney's time and effort and whatever he submitted to the city, and the city council, nope, this is what we want to do. And that smells. That smells.
I think so too. I think it's actually total bullshit. I think, we pay to have a labor attorney. We've already paid him to give an opinion. We pay to have a city attorney. We've already paid for that opinion. Why would we pay for a third opinion from an outside law firm that's going to cost a really decent amount of money? Lawyers ain't cheap. I don't get it. I think it's crazy.
Who will come to the same conclusion, by the way. If it's a good, experienced labor attorney, I submit he'd come to the same conclusion.
Yeah. Anyway, you guys, I want to move us along just a little bit, because we have another very, very controversial issue that we wanted to talk about. And we gotten a lot of feedback. I don't know if you guys have, but I gotten a lot of feedback from people that we should have brought this up earlier and talked about it earlier, because it has tugged at so many people's heartstrings and been upsetting for so many people I hate to say it, but on both sides of this, it has been upsetting for people. So Adam, I don't know if you want to kind of recap this story, or you want me to recap this story, but essentially, go ahead.
But you recap and I'll give my
okay. So essentially what happened was, back in January, there was a cat named KANE who lived near the Spring Street DELI, which is on Spring Street on the east side of town. And KANE is an outdoor cat and would, bop around the neighborhood and would occasionally go into Spring Street DELI. When he went into Spring Street DELI, this cat was fed little scraps of food, I think sometimes by customers, sometimes by employees. One way or the other, this cat knew that if it wanted a quick snack, a great place to go was Spring Street DELI. So it sounded as if the owner of Spring Street DELI started getting very frustrated with this cat being in their establishment because of reasons why you would not want a cat in a restaurant. And so he made a decision to take the cat one night. He drove to the animal shelter at about, I believe it was about 6 p.m.
This is all alleged, right, Robin? Sorry to jump
all
in.
Alleged. This is all alleged. Thank you, Dan, for reminding me of that. There was one element caught on video, though. So I think the video element is, videos are usually pretty truthful. But he pulled up to the animal shelter, and the animal shelter was closed. And he allegedly made the decision to leave the cat there outside the shelter, even though I think it was about 10 degrees that night and the shelter wasn't open. So he basically tossed the cat, abandoned the cat, and took off, thinking his problems were over with the cat coming in to Spring Street DELI. That moment was caught on camera. And so the whereabouts of the cat are still unknown, but people in the community are aware that the owner of Spring Street DELI was at the animal shelter and did release this cat into the basically street because the shelter was not open. And they're very, very, very upset. And there's a large part of me that understands why they're very upset. It seems like to think about doing something like that seems extremely unhumane. And if it was my cat or my dog or my pet that had happened to, I would be extraordinarily upset that had happened. There has been an outcry from the community, though, that has been, I mean, it's been very overwhelming, I think, to a degree. There are moments where I am like, this feels like a human baby was tossed out a window, because the outcry has become so extreme from some people. There have been everything from like regular grid searches done looking for this cat, to multiple social media groups that have formed looking for justice for KANE, the cat. They're selling T-shirts. They're very, very intent on holding the owner of Spring Street Deli to account. To that end, he has been arrested and charged with, I believe, animal neglect or cruelty. I believe that's the charge. He has had his initial court date. Nothing has been decided yet in court. I believe there was a plea bargain that was offered but not accepted at the time. But I do also know, on the flip side of this, that the owner of Spring Street Deli and his family have gotten multiple death threats from people online and otherwise. And it has been extraordinarily traumatic and upsetting for that man's family to go through this and to receive, I mean, death threats in general are not something anyone wants to receive at any point in time ever. And I think it's upsetting that people have responded in that way, despite the fact I understand their passion and how upset they are. That's still not the right way to articulate that. The main focus from people who have been upset about this and following this has been to shut down Spring Street Deli and to boycott that business. And that's really where all their efforts kind of have been focused, on finding the cat and boycotting the business and shutting down the business. So I think that's a pretty good summary of where we are. I obviously have a lot of opinions about it. Adam, I know you have opinions. Dan, I'm sure you have opinions too. But Adam, why don't you kind of share with us your thoughts here?
I'll say I have a lot of close connections to this. I live less than a block away from Spring Street Deli and from where KANE lives, the cat, or where KANE did live. I know I grew up with one of the family members of the Spring Street Deli ownership, so I know them well. I'm somebody, I've had I've rescued 2 cats before, 5 rescue dogs before, not all at the same time, but I've I'm somebody who has a deep respect for animals as well. I know I'm not here to justify what the owner of Spring Street Deli did. I think it was a dumb move. I think everything it was a teaching moment for my kids, where you have to every decision you make like this, you have to think about what the ramifications are. I think he was fed up with this cat. He took it to the he was going to take it to the animal shelter, which again I think is an appropriate response to if you had a nuisance animal around your business, and up until the point of where he left it at the animal shelter. I think that was a stupid move. A real dumb move, and I don't condone that. With that being said, I know this family. I know how hard they've worked for that business, but I know they've had this family, without going into too much personal detail, has faced struggles that probably none of us have. They've overcome challenges, and they're still fighting things unrelated to this that for me gives, before this game, and especially for the other family members, a lot of admiration for what they do and what they've gone through. So I think it comes down to, what is justice? This family has paid a price. I know they have. And it's a very serious price, and it was a very serious action. But to the implications of shutting down a business, the employees, to the family members, is as hard as it is, because if this happened to one of my animals, I would be livid as well, and I understand that anger. But at some point, the punishment has to fit the crime. It's in the court systems now, and the vigilante justice that's out there has to stop, because that is not the basis of how our society is supposed to operate. So I think this family has paid a dear price. I don't condone what they did, but I think at some point it's time to remember that it was a sweet cat, and still praying they find the cat, but you can't essentially sentence a family and a business to a death sentence for a really dumb move. So that's my thought on it.
Can I quickly read the apology that the Spring Street Deli owner offered up? Because I do think this is part of how there's been a lot of mishandling, in my opinion, of things like since this incident happened. One of the ways in which I thought it was mishandled was through the apology that the Spring Street Deli owner put out, because I thought it was a piss poor apology, and it kind of enraged people further. So the apology that was put out on January 30th, so a month ago now, was, "Dear community, I would like to offer my heartfelt apologies on behalf of Spring Street Deli and Pizzeria for any disappointment or inconvenience caused by recent incidents. Our aim is to provide a positive experience for every customer, and it deeply saddens me to hear that we have fallen short of your expectations. We take your concerns seriously, and we are actively addressing the issue to ensure they don't happen again. Your feedback is crucial in helping us improve, and we are committed to regaining your trust. Thank you for your understanding and continued support. So to me, as like someone who does a lot of PR, that is bad. That was a bad attempt at an apology. This is a person who's in a legal situation, so they clearly can't be specific because there's a pending legal case, right?
Are they very handcuffed though with what they could say?
Right. So that's exactly my point. If you can't put together a decent apology because of a legal situation, then shut your mouth, because saying that they've fallen short of people's expectations, or that there's been disappointment or inconvenience surrounding a recent incident, when the incident is basically that you tossed a cat out the window and it's dead now, that is no bueno. No. And I just think it enraged people further. And again, I am just alleging that this cat is dead, and I hope the cat is not dead. I would love to see some like miracle, or secretly it's been at Adam's house this entire time and he gets to like rise from the ashes with the cat. But unfortunately, everything we know about winter and a cat and, all the challenges that would face, my guess is we're not going to be seeing Kane the cat. So again, just not great that he wants to apologize, but not the right words. Anyway, Dan, go ahead.
Yeah, just a quick update. As of last week, there was a Gazette article, and he was offered a plea deal in court, Milton Town Court, to a conditional discharge, but he had to agree not to have a pet for 50 years, which is significant. And he's scheduled, at least as of last week, he was scheduled to appear in Milton Court this coming Tuesday. Now, these things are often adjourned. With this level of emotion, it wouldn't shock me if that court date on Tuesday was adjourned to a later date. But that's the last I knew from the article from last week. But yeah, that apology reminded me like it was akin to an email you might get from a chain restaurant after getting a bad meal.
I know, or like AT&T after the outage last week.
I'm sorry?
Like AT&T after the outage last week.
Oh, yeah.
You know what I mean? Like something like that.
Here's $5. Go away.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. I do feel for what Adam's talking about for the family, though, the business. I've always been a fan of Spring Street. I used to live close to it as well. Their egg sandwiches are to die for. Obviously, this doesn't justify anything that happened. Let me just say something here, and no, I'm not gonna. I'll have to think this through before I get the whole world mad at us. I just had an added thought, but I'd rather think it through and bring it up. I'm sure we'll be talking about this again.
Think it through while I say this. I understand that people's like immediate impulse was to boycott the business. I totally get that impulse, and there are a lot of situations in which I'd be like, hell yes, do that. But when I step back to think about it for a moment, and I think about all the people that business employs, do I want them to lose their jobs? Hell no, of course not. Do I want this family to lose their health insurance? No. Do I want them to go through like a financial ordeal of losing their business and not having a way to provide for their family? These employees losing their jobs, having to go find new jobs. Do I want any of those things to happen? No. That to me feels like two wrongs don't make a right. So I feel like there's got to be another avenue for people to express their anger and frustration without potentially, shutting down a business and having people lose their jobs. I don't know. But at the same time, what this guy did is really what he allegedly did is really kind of indefensible. So it's tough.
Show up. We do Kane, we please just you can show up. Anyway, all right. Well, we're over an hour now.
An hour. I know it's a tough one. Kane the cat is a tough one, you guys. I gotta say, and I would love for someone to show up. And I don't mean for this to be like lighthearted and a joke, but in that movie, Meet the Parents, when like Jinxie Cat goes missing, I want someone to show up with Jinxie Cat and bring Kane back. But anyway, let's move on to our cheers and cheers before we really quickly wrap up. What do you guys got? Who's got a good cheer and cheer for me?
Okay. Robin, you're going to be talking about what's happening tomorrow night at City Hall, correct? I don't want to steal your thunder.
I am. I was planning on it.
Okay, good. I won't mention that, but I will absolutely concur with what you're going to say on that. I'm going to I've got a cheer here for Chris Mathieson. He has been active at city council meetings. He comes there as a almost lifelong resident since the 1950s, a business owner that had a place downtown. So when he talks about things like the parking proposal and so forth, he comes with some knowledge. He was on the city council like you were, Robin, so he brings great perspective, and he's becoming like an honest broker. I hope we are honest brokers. John Kaufman are honest brokers. But one thing, we and Kaufman, we're pointed towards people. We like people. We don't like people. To Chris's credit, he's been focusing on issues. And he's been writing letters. I'm going to post one tomorrow that he wrote about the short-term rental, or is it parking? I can't remember which one I'm posting. But I just respect him for everything he's been doing, the approach he's been taking. I criticized him for running a poor primary campaign a year ago against Mayor Kim, but I respect him, and he gets a cheer from me today on just who he is as an elder statesman of this city who gives perspective on some of the most important things and takes the time to do it. My jeer, and this one's a bit old, but it relates to Chris Mathieson. It's a Chris Mathieson love fest because I am still mad that Ron Kim, one of his last acts as mayor, was to falsely accuse Chris Mathieson of causing the problems on Van Dam Street. 2.5 months later, I am still really mad about that. Chris Mathieson is owed an apology. If Ron Kim won't do it, then the current city council should do it. And not just wrong against Chris Mathieson, but that was wrong against the people on Van Dam who are suffering there. And it's this guy that caused my re-election campaign to fail. He's your problem. I mean, to use the people on Van Dam and their problems for political retribution. Damn it, I'm still pissed about that.
I totally agree, Dan. And I'm also just realizing if I try to do the cheer I want to do, I'm totally going to start to cry, which I really don't want to do on this podcast. So Dan, will you do my cheer for me? Because it's just about tomorrow night and
okay.
Yeah.
Yes. Tomorrow is February 29th, a leap year. Our beloved late Commissioner Skip Scirocco was born on leap year. That's why he was called Skip, as I understand it. And the city council is going to be dedicating the music hall. And Skip was a musician, and he was also the one responsible for refurbishing the music hall after the fire. They are going to have a ceremony at 5:30 p.m. at City Hall, honoring Skip Scirocco and naming the music hall after him. And everybody that knew Skip, loves Skip, or just loves this city. And I can't say the many things he brought to this city in such a good way. John Kaufman wrote a beautiful blog post about him on the What's Going on Saratoga Politics, or what Saratoga Springs Politics blog. Robin, I'm sorry, you got to say more because I didn't know Skip personally.
No, you did a great job, and I freaking hate. I never cry in life, and I feel like I've cried like twice on this podcast already. No, I appreciate you doing that because it's just hard for me to talk about. Skip and I sat next to each other in the city council. He was one of the kindest, loveliest men I've ever known, and I miss him terribly. So I'm just happy that we're doing this dedication and happy that I can be there. But anyway, moving on to my jeer. My jeer is really stupid and superficial, you guys, but it's right here. My jeer are these goddamn Stanley Cups. They absolutely suck. They absolutely suck. And if we weren't at 107, like we were at 108 right now, like an hour and 8 minutes, I would elaborate in detail as to why Stanley Cups suck so much. Don't get them, people. Don't get them. They're not worth the freaking $45. They absolutely blow. I'll go into detail on it another time, but that was my stupid jeer for the week.
All right.
Anyway, Adam, you're up, kid.
I'll start with my jeer. It's a common one. This goes out to the Times Union and the editorial board. The Times Union editorial board wrote a piece about the AG report and about Commissioner Cole's response. And again, it's unbelievable how this newspaper continues to carry the water of the Democrat Party in Saratoga Springs, New York. They made no mention of the fact that Tim's comments forced the AG to have to revise this report. They actually in the opinion piece, they said there's little wonder, now I'm quoting here, there's little wonder that the city's last insurance carrier refused to renew its coverage, which former Mayor Ron Kim noted was largely due to this very issue. It was not, the insurance carrier made it very clear they are not carrying us because Mayor Kim's approach to risk and safety had nothing to do with this. And the Times Union continues to quote Ron, to use Ron Kim's name in this and making this sound like this is the reason why insurance carrier left, which they are smart enough, I would imagine so, to know this is blatantly a lie. This is not even not true. It's a lie and it's horrific. They closed, and I'll read what they closed with. They closed with no police force or government in this country gets to choose what speech they're willing to tolerate or use their power to shut it down, which is true. But no police force gets to choose what laws they choose to enforce or not enforce. And when people are breaking the law, it is a police department and a municipality's responsibility to enforce the law and justice, which they did. And for the Times Union to keep this narrative going is absolutely unbelievable. It is a garbage newspaper, and it does Saratoga a disservice by continuing the narrative that we are a racist city with police officers who are killing young black men. So Times Union, shame on you. This is ridiculous. How do you go to sleep at night calling yourself journalist? It's horrible. All right, that's my jeer.
Wow.
Times Union, you are
fired up, and I'm fired up.
So.
My cheer is next week. We're going to dive more into the AG report because Robin will be on a plane, so she won't be on the show. So there won't be any, like we talked about before, because she's part of this. There's only so much we can talk about with her on the show. But Dan, you and I are really going to pick this up for the piece of I don't know. We'll save it for next week. But tune in next week to hear it. On that note, stay charming, Saratoga.
Bye, guys.
Thanks for watching, folks.